Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, and London, England, as well as Paris, France, and of course you good old boys from Canada. You know we love you in Africa, the Big C tribe, but there's no one we love more than you good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful July 30th, 2018. Big C, how's it going for you good old boys?
Well, Charlton is going good, but I don't know if everything is free. You know, I got this little news story about the Falcons the other day. You know, they opened up training camp to the public in their new Dome Stadium.
Oh, yeah.
But Arthur Blank was doing a little entrepreneurship.
What was he doing?
He said $5 you can come in and watch.
$5?
Over 60,000 people in the stadium, Charlton.
Wow.
The last I calculated, Arthur made a little over $300,000, so I guess he can afford to pay Julio that extra money now.
It was all for love of Julio, and sometimes you do what you can to keep your star players happy. But that's not right, Arthur. That's a lot of money for people to watch practice, Big C. I do want to say a lot of good things happening in the sports universe. WNBA All-Star version doesn't compare to what the men pulled off with Coke. If you think about all the things that we've had for All-Star game, LeBron James, Steph Curry, that was fantastic. But congratulations to the women for having their game. Baseball swinging the bat all over the place. But I do want to say that people like Scott Frost, when you get a job and you're welcomed back by your alma mater, it's a shame that the same amount of money that Julio Jones' earring cost was the amount he got hit for, Big C. So hopefully there's not a correlation. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, it's amazing. You know, everybody thinks about the people in the Midwest as being meek, easygoing, Charlton. And all of a sudden, Scott Frost gets lured back to his alma mater where he won a national championship with Nebraska when he played quarterback. So over the weekend at his home, you know, he goes out on an outing with the family.
Yeah.
Comes back and somebody outed him of over $150,000 in jewelry, Charlton.
Wow. Including
his national championship ring that he won at the University of Nebraska. So I guess that's what you call a welcome home party, Charlton. Is that, you know, we're happy to have you. But, you know, maybe he should have called one of those security companies and got an in-home alarm, Charlton.
Yeah, I wonder who has that kind of money just sitting around, or jewelry sitting around anyway. I guess if you're making that kind of money, 150 is not that much. I do want to say today's segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. So a lot happening in college. And thinking about Scott Frost, I know that schools get hazed. If you're USC, UCLA, sometimes people will go out and paint the Bruin Bear where they have it gold. They'll go out and paint it, you know, burgundy or yellow. And sometimes UCLA would go over to USC's campus. Michigan State do the same thing. I just wonder, because college football can be so fanatical, was it one of the rivals of Nebraska that went in to do it? Their biggest rival used to be Oklahoma, but they're in different conferences now. It used to be Colorado, but they're also in different conferences. Do they? What would be your thoughts on that type of vandalism? It's just kind of odd, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you get these overzealous fans. They're going by, probably wanted an autograph, and you know, he wasn't home.
Yeah.
And you know, when you live in places like that, you know, a lot of people don't always lock their doors, Charlton. And I guess being back in that environment that, you know, that was under Tom Osborne, there was, you know, a really laid-back community. But times have changed.
Yeah.
And you know when you get a new coach coming in, he's probably living in a new neighborhood, and you know, he hasn't gotten to know his neighbors, and the neighbors haven't gotten to know the people that he knows.
No.
So all of a sudden he comes in, and you know, it's like Yasiel Puig last year, Charlton, during the World Series.
That's right.
When some of his friends decided to go by and take $1.5 million worth of jewelry out of his house. And so these things happen. LeBron James had a house broken in Los Angeles during the season last year.
Yeah.
It's just people are targeting people, Charlton, and especially athletes. One of the things that all these news outlets do, Charlton, when they go by someone's home or interviewing them away from the facility, ironically, they show these street signs periodically.
Yeah.
And so by showing a street sign, you get some familiarity where somebody lives. You may even show the house number, you know, when you're looking at the door.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of times you can be set up by a news outlet and unwillingly not known.
Yeah.
You know, maybe he needs to get, like I said, with one of these security companies, start doing some endorsement deal with them.
Yeah.
Get a home security system, Charlton. We see them all over television.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have some lights come on, things like that. But, you know, it's an unfortunate incident to go back to where you started out and took a team to fame, Charlton, and you go back and they welcome you back by hoisting all your jewelry.
I think he needs to meet the great Shaquille O'Neal, because he also has some alarm commercials too. But even going into that, when you think about, everybody thinks they want to be famous. Sometimes fame could be the worst thing that could ever happen to a person. Most people, I think, if they're famous, they don't want to be famous. They just want to be respected. And the part that we all don't look at, Big C, is when something happens like that. It happens all the time in this country. But it happened to a well-known person, about to become even more famous, Scott Frost. You think about Osborne, what he did to build the University of Nebraska's football program. Will Frost have the same kind of success? I don't know. But when you talk about something like that happen, I wonder if anything like that has ever happened to the coach Tom Osborne. If it did, it probably was not, you know, televised or mentioned, Big C, in media. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you know, legendary coaches back years ago, Charlton, those type of incidents didn't occur. You know, everybody revered these people. They live within the communities. They didn't live outside of the norm. They didn't draw attention to themselves. But, you know, media now has made athletes and coaches vulnerable, Charlton, is what has occurred, is that they want to get into every aspect of somebody's life.
Yeah.
And the worst thing that anybody can do, whether it's an athlete or a coach, is give a home interview. Because if they see anything that they may recognize, and now if you go with some of these home search sites, Charlton, these real estate sites, you can find somebody's home, and you can find recognizable, you know, objects in a yard and in the front, back, you know, neighbor's house that draws you to that individual's dwelling.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason why, if you're going to do an interview and you're in this athletic realm, do it in a studio, do it at the work facility, Charlton. But stay away from your home. Don't invite people into your home, because now all of a sudden you've invited a potential problem. Because you never know who's watching on television. And with the electronic age that we're in nowadays, Charlton, you can find anything. And so don't make you and your home and your family vulnerable because some news outlet wants to do an interview.
You know, that's very true. And I also want to take the time to just say, I know we touched on it last week, but the fires that are all over California, it seems, especially up in Northern California in the Redding area, there were reports over the weekend that they only have about 5 to 10% containment. There's ash that you can smell all the way down into the north part of the Bay Area, where it tends to be very windy with the microclimates. And there have been hundreds of homes lost, destroyed, more properties being destroyed. I'm glad to hear that with the help of the Red Cross, a lot of people got away. But when you watch the news and you see some of those neighborhoods, often all you will see are the frames of cars, the houses that were made of brick. The brick is still there, but the wood and stucco's gone. I'm just glad that some people heeded the warning to get away. And again, all of our thoughts and prayers go out to the family, and especially the firefighters from all over California that are up helping to put out fires. Big C, your thoughts on people starting to heed the warning on getting away when you get the warning that there is a national disaster? I think Governor Brown has actually called for a state of emergency for California. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, unfortunately, everybody has not heeded the warning. And today they found the remains of a grandmother and her 2 young grandchildren who did not heed the warning and leave in time, Charlton.
Wow.
And that should be a tragedy warning to everybody, Charlton, that nothing physical is worth losing your life, regardless of what you put into it, memories, investment, whatever, Charlton, leave. Because when you're alive the next day, you still had a potential to rebuild. And most homes have insurance, Charlton.
Yeah.
But, don't put yourself in harm's way. It's not necessary. Don't even speculate to say, well, we'll ride it out, and if the winds change, because when the winds change and the fire change direction, Charlton, it knows nobody. All it is looking for is fuel. And so everybody should heed the warning, and unfortunately this family has lost 3 members of their family, Charlton. But everybody, just get in your car. If you want to take some things and load it up, Forget your car, your truck, whatever transportation you have, and leave.
Yeah.
Go to a shelter, and heed the warning. When we have our national agencies telling you that your life is in risk and it's unhealthy,
Yeah.
and that it's dangerous to be in a certain place, listen to them.
Yeah.
They're experts. We're guessing as private citizens.
That's very true. So again, for all the people, it's just tragic when you see it. If you're able to get access to getting away, get away, because if you can't get out, that means fire department can't get in. And oftentimes the roads are burned out. So I know everybody's looking forward to football season and getting ready to go back to school, but there are a lot of people that are going to be displaced for a long time. We just hope that for everybody who still has a chance to get away, and it's sad news to hear about what you just mentioned, Big C, but we hope that people can still heed the warnings. I want to go back to what we talked about Scott Frost at Nebraska. What is he really stepping into? He turned Central Florida around, went undefeated, and we know that when he played at Nebraska, they had a very dominant football team, very successful. But in order for him to have the same kind of success that Tom Osborne had, I think about some of the players that came through that great university. Roger Craig was one of them, Tom Rathbone, and they had that backfield. They had Turner Gill back in the day when they played for a national championship, went for 2 against Miami and Alan Sullenberger, and Miami stopped the play at the goal line, and then Miami went on to win the national championship. Big C, what must Frost do to get those kind of athletes, because they seem to happen year after year with Osborne? What will he have to do to have that same kind of success, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, let's see. He's in the Big Ten now. Let's start with Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State. Dalton, there's a road full of landmines that he has to conquer to win that conference, Dalton. The Big Ten is not easy as the Big 8 was when he was a player.
Yeah.
And the wealth of college talent, Charlton, has changed over the decades. He was in Florida, so he could recruit local kids, Charlton, and keep them there in the state because there's so much talent in Florida. Now, can he influence those same kids, Charlton, to come to school in Nebraska? You got to realize those kids have never seen snow.
On TV, so, only on TV.
If he's going to bring them in on a recruiting trip, Charlton, he's got to make sure it's during the summer. He can't bring them in during Christmas break, Thanksgiving break, Charlton. He can't bring the kids into Nebraska because the snow is 2-3 feet deep. And so that's going to deter a lot of kids. It's going to take a while to turn things around in Nebraska. And when you look at it, Mike Riley was there, and people say, the atmosphere has changed. It used to be in the Big 8, Charlton, there was Oklahoma, Nebraska, Texas. That was it. Forever. Those 3 schools, they were the rivals. And now when they moved into the Big 10, I think they got 23 teams in that conference now, Charlton. It makes it a lot more difficult to recruit. And when you look at the appealingness of that conference, Nebraska's an outpost.
They are.
They're out in the Midwest. I mean, great steaks. Don't get me wrong. If you want some beef,
Omaha steaks.
But, when you look at the rest of the Big Ten, it's always a serious road game. And, like I said, a lot of athletes no longer want to go to an environment when they're freezing all the time, Charles, if they haven't had snow and freezing their entire life.
And
so that's going to be the number one draw that it's going to take for him to get people there. I think that he can find some success, Charlton. If he can win 9 or 10 games within his second year, that's success in Nebraska. Well, he will be okay with the alumni.
And you think about it too, Big C. Would you have ever thought, especially when Tom Osborne was at the helm, and I know Riley was there also, and they've had a couple of other coaches come and go, but they were never able to grab
when they
what
had
Osborne
Bo Pelini,
had.
you think about it. Bo Pelini won the title once while he was at Charlton because he played Texas in the Big 12 championship game. But Bo Pelini won at least 9 games every year he was at Nebraska. This lets you know how disenchanted fans and alumni are. He won at least 9 games every year that he was at Nebraska. That wasn't good enough because what you said about Tom Osborne is that they had been spoiled by a coach who had taken them to national championship games, and even before Tom Osborne, Bob Devaney, who had built the legacy for Osborne to just fall into. So you had a rich, legacy of coaching in Nebraska, and then all of a sudden coaches come along, Charlton, and only win 9 games. And people remember we used to play for national championships a decade ago.
Yeah.
But the landscape of college football has changed also dramatically in that decade.
Yeah, and then when you even bring that up, Big C, I remember the days of Osborne where he would bring the Huskers out to UCLA. They would play down in Los Angeles at the Rose Bowl. And they had, I will never forget, they would come into California and get some of the top kids from northern, central, and southern California to go back there and play in the great state of Nebraska. But he had built up that type of reputation. And as you mentioned earlier, they would usually have one tough non-conference game, and then they had to get by Oklahoma and then Texas. Outside of that, they really did not have a lot of competition when they played back in the Big 8 Conference. Now, even if Tom Osborne were there, I know when there's a lot of talk as to why Nebraska left the Big 8 Conference. Instead of joining the Big 12, they went to the Big 10. I think it had to do with a championship game where they let Texas win that game. They thought the officials did it. Something happened at the end of it, and Texas went on and won the conference, where Nebraska felt like they were cheated. The next year, they jumped conferences, which really took one of the marquee programs out of that Big 8, Big 12 kind of conference. I don't know if Tom Osborne would have had as much success winning up north, because as you mentioned, Michigan State, Michigan, even Iowa, Ohio State, Wisconsin, there's a lot more, bears to slay than there are just Oklahoma and Texas every year. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when Osborne was coaching, Charlton, he could promise players, you're going to be on TV 5 times. You're going to play in a bowl game. He could make that promise to players when he was recruiting, Charlton.
Yeah.
You got to understand, ESPN wasn't dominant like it is now. Fox Sports was not dominant, Charlton. You had a couple networks that covered game of the week. Teams like Nebraska was always going to get 4 to 5 games on television. That was a recruiting tool.
Yeah.
I know when I came out of high school, that was a recruiting tool. Is that you were asking recruiters, is there going to be any games on television?
Yeah. Yeah.
Every kid wanted to know that. Well, we got 1 game on television. We got 2 games on television. You were hearing that.
Yeah.
That was excitement. That was Christmas, that your family was going to have an opportunity to see you on television.
Yeah.
Now that's not a recruiting tool any longer, Charlton, because there are so many media outlets broadcasting college football.
Yeah.
So you have to have something beyond just saying we have a game or 2 on television, Charlton. And so now this is why we see these humongous stadiums. Nebraska expanded their stadium, I believe it was 3-4 seasons ago, where they added another upper deck on the stadium, Charlton.
Yeah.
It was already the 3rd largest populated city in the state of Nebraska on game day.
Yeah.
Lincoln Stadium in Nebraska was the 3rd largest populated city in the state on game day.
Yeah.
And so they added even more. So, these are the draw appeals that you have to have now for the athletes, Charlton. The stadium, the facilities for the players, the locker room, the workout facilities, the weight room. Nebraska's always been an iconic facility for weights, Charlton. They've built players from the ground up for decades.
Yeah.
But, you always have to go above and beyond. I mean, you look at the University of Oregon out there on the West Coast.
Yep.
I mean, their draw appeal is apparel for players.
Yeah.
Players know that they're going to have the newest, greatest design that Nike has come up with.
19 different colors.
By going to Oregon, that you're going to have 20 different uniforms. You never wear the same uniform in a season.
Yeah.
So that's very attractive when players are being fashion conscionable now, and we know how they like their, off the field wear as well. So there always has to be something different. Now, can Nebraska have some appeal beyond just the game? That's yet to be seen with Scott Frost.
Yeah, and you think about Frost, too, and I remember some of the other players they've had, Leroy Etienne, who played at linebacker. I remember that Nebraska team played UCLA. It was Terry Donahue's team that came in there with Troy Aikman. They were both ranked in the top 10 of the country, and I think Nebraska got out of there with a pretty good win. I think 42-29 or 41-30. I know it was a pretty high-scoring game. UCLA had Ken Norton Jr. in the backfield. They had a couple of good running backs, Gaston Green. But I'll never forget, they had DeMarco Farr, Troy Aikman. And then Nebraska had some players. They had a guy named Steve. I can't remember his last name, but he was a quarterback that threw like 5 touchdown passes.
Fuller.
He was from Fresno. They had a quarterback from Fresno that was in UCLA territory that went to Nebraska through 5 touchdown passes. I know he
had a great outside linebacker, Trave Albert, who was the number 1 draft pick of the Indianapolis Colts. I remember that your buddy, with all the hair, Mel Kiper, got into it with Bill Poland on it. And, and Bill Poland dressed him down. So, I can't remember the last time that you drafted anybody.
Yeah. So those days in Nebraska, I know they were bringing back one of their own brethren. They had the great Lawrence Phillips. I remember in the national championship game against Florida, I think they beat Florida. They put 50 points on Florida, maybe more than that. But I think that game, for Frost to come from Florida, and at that time Florida played for the national championship, and that was when Lawrence Phillips and Tommy Smith.
Tommy Frazier.
Smith
was a running back, number 28.
And Frazier, you're right. Frazier was a quarterback. There are some people, Big C, that even in the Midwest, let me say, how will Frost recruit the way Osborne did? There are still people that think that Nebraska team might have been the greatest ever that Nebraska's ever had, especially because they put over 50 points on the Florida program. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they had huge linemen, Charlton. I remember Dave Remington and Zine Steinkuhler, Charlton. This was a team that was built on intimidation.
Yes.
And physical football. They just ran it down your throat. They didn't know anything about finesse, The pass play, Charlton, was the third option in the offense, okay? They ran the ball, then they ran the ball, then they might throw the ball. So it was the third option in the offensive scheme.
Yeah.
So, but, it was about power football.
Yeah.
And, we've talked about everybody going to the spread offenses now. In football, Nebraska would just line up and hit you in the mouth. And that was one of the things about when they talked about Midwest football. Everybody did. Even Oklahoma, one of the major opponents, ran the wishbone. They just lined it up and came at you.
Yeah.
It wasn't about throwing the ball. You think about the tremendous athletes they had. They were always known for throwing the football. It's like when Keith Jackson, their tight end, became a number 1 draft pick in the NFL of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
The guy caught 16 passes as a senior in college.
Yeah.
But he was the number 1 draft pick of the Eagles and was an all-pro tight end.
Yeah.
But you had these great running backs, Billy Sims, David Overstreet, guys who could turn the corner and get upfield, and that's what the offense was built around, Charlton.
Yeah.
And Nebraska was the same way. I mean, you go back to the days of Johnny Rogers at Nebraska, Steve Kinney, a great running back that they had there, Charlton. This was a team that was built on going straight ahead.
Yeah.
Not sideline to sideline, straight ahead.
Yeah.
And with the landscape has changed, and you look at what Frost did in Florida last year, Charlton, Central Florida, he's going to have to go out and find a quarterback that can chuck the football. Nebraska's been up and down and marginal with quarterbacks over the past 10 years.
Yeah.
But he needs to go out and find a kid that can chuck the football if he plans on competing, and I think he'll have some success with that, Charlton, within his first couple of years.
When I think about McCartney, when he built Colorado into that national championship program, I think they won right around 90-91. Colorado won the national championship. I remember they had a big game with the University of Washington Huskies and Don James' crew. But I think about Eric Bieniemy, who played at Colorado. That gave the kids that were recruited by Nebraska and Colorado, they were back and forth. McCartney and then Osborne. Eric Bieniemy came out of Southern California and played for the Buffaloes. They had Rashawn Salaam. They had so many great players, but most of those players back in the day, they talked about they left California to either play for Nebraska, or Colorado, or in Oklahoma. Do you think that Nebraska's kind of lost its identity? Like, who is their rival now? They can't say it's Oklahoma anymore because it's not playing for a conference championship. They can't say that it's Colorado. They're not playing for a conference championship. Do you think that's part of their failure? That kids, when they go there, there's no big conference game to get up for. It's just hanging out in the cold in the Midwest. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Thompson, a lot of those kids wanted to get out of the inner city problems that they had grown up in. When you look at those times when those coaches were winning in the late 80s and early 90s.
Yeah.
But also those communities weren't ready for those inner city kids.
Oh, really?
And profiling came a big part of those kids being in those cities and when they left campus.
Yeah.
They had a lot of problem with law enforcement. You're on the street and all of a sudden you're getting stopped, you're getting pulled over, you're getting questioned. And you're just a college kid.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why those pipelines kind of dried up, Charlton,
that's a good
going
point.
to a lot of those Midwestern cities.
Yeah.
Is that those kids saw that they could go elsewhere and they didn't have to be in those places for athletic outlet, Charlton. And because of the landscape has changed, like I said, television has offered many opportunities for many universities that would not have gotten certain athletes.
Yeah.
Because those schools, Charlton, were always on television. But when you weren't on campus, and I was recruited by a few Midwest schools, and you were always told, at certain times you don't want to be in certain places.
Yeah.
And all kids don't always adhere to that. They say, well, I've been here for a year, so now I'm assimilated into the community. It's not always true.
Yep.
We still have problems with that in society today, but think about how that was. You're an inner-city kid from Southern California. All of a sudden, you're thrusted into the Midwest, into Kansas, into Nebraska,
yeah.
In Iowa. And all of a sudden, people are looking at you differently and being skeptical of you. Even Colorado, they're being skeptical of you because the way you dress, the way your hair is cut, is not what they're used to seeing, Charlton.
That's a good point.
Yeah. It raises alarms back then, and it still does today. Society hasn't changed that much when we talk about social equality and treating everybody the same. That stuff went under the radar because it wasn't social media back then, Charlton. But you can go back, anybody, and you can Google local police, not the police, but local newspapers.
Yeah.
And you'll find stories of athletes all the time, Charlton, being stopped, being incarcerated, being ticketed, because they didn't get into the community look.
That's
and
interesting.
So that dried up a lot of that, as they would say, gravy train for those coaches, Charlton.
Yeah.
Getting those kids from the inner city to go to those schools. And that's why schools on the West Coast started getting good again. Oregon State started developing, Washington State, because those kids no longer wanted to leave the West Coast anymore because those teams were playing on television now.
That's a very good point you brought up. And I think about that statement, and as you did mention, when Nebraska and even Colorado were winning or competing for a national championship, Oklahoma hasn't fallen off. They've found a way to go and recruit Texas, so they will always have that strong pipeline. But you just mentioned something that really caught my eye, how the demise of Nebraska football and the demise of even Colorado football, you saw a resurgence of the West Coast, but it was mostly up north. It was the schools in Oregon State, Washington State, and even Arizona State, because they had a chance to stay on the West Coast. I think what the Pac-10 did when it became the Pac-12, they had what's called the Pac-12 network. Just what you talked about Notre Dame did back in the day, and also what the SEC network did back in the day. And you mentioned what they say to recruits. The recruits say, well, how many times will we be on TV? Well, almost every major conference can say every week now, because they have a cable deal. They have streaming services. So with all of that being said, Nebraska, if Frost is going to have success there the way Osborne did, he has a lot more to overcome, being in a different conference, tougher schools, I would think, up north with traditional powers that play for bragging rights as well as just trying to win a conference championship. So he's going to have his hands full, and I don't know if football will ever come back the way it did under Coach Osborne back in the day. But I do want to swing to another thought with college football. I know we have the NFL kicking off on Thursday with the Hall of Fame game, but the SEC, we've gotten through most conferences, Big C, they've had their media conference day. And the Nick Saban thing we talked about last week, but no one ever thinks about who would be the next king of that conference, of the SEC. Because Alabama's not going to stay on top forever. They haven't always been on top forever. It may just seem that way. But you see SEC football all the time. Who's poised to be that next king that knocks Alabama off the top, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I think their biggest rival, Charlton, will be the one they played in the national championship game. You got Kirby Smart at Georgia. They were a play away from winning the national championship. Georgia was.
Yeah.
Tua Tagovailoa threw the touchdown pass, and that could propel Alabama to another national championship. It's Nick Saban's fifth at that university.
Yeah.
But when you look at that conference, Charlton, they have a lineage of coaches there that have coached under Nick Saban. And so there's rivalries. The new coach at Tennessee was a five, he has the 5 titles at Alabama along with Nick Saban as the defensive coordinator. So, when you take the 2 defensive coordinators and you put them in that same conference, Charlton, there's competition. They understand what he does offensively. That's why that championship game was so closely fought last year.
Yeah.
Is that Georgia knew what Alabama was going to do. Is just Tua Tagovailoa they had not seen, and Kirby Smart had not coached against him in practice. Everybody else he had.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why they were right in the game. But Nick Saban, he has 7 years left on his contract. Take that back, 8 years with the extension.
Yeah.
He's going to be paid $74 million on that contract, Charles.
Wow.
Over the next 8 years, $74 million. Not take that, I said 8 years, it's 7 years. 7 years because it's 2025.
Yeah.
So he's getting $74 million in that time on that contract, Charles.
Yeah.
So it's going to take a lot. I mean, everybody's out recruiting now. There's so many tremendous athletes on the high school level, Charlton. And it's hard, and the good teams keep stockpiling.
Yep.
There's a reason why they keep going there. It's like when Nick Saban walks in on a recruiting trip, and he sits there and he puts his hand on his thigh. And he got 5 championship rings on his hand.
Yeah.
What's not impressive about that on a recruiting trip? I don't care what you say about his record,
right,
about him as a person, how much money he makes. When he plops down his hand on his thigh as he's talking to a young man, and the parents are there,
the bling,
and he's got 5 championship rings sitting there.
Yes.
And he said, how many championships did the last coach have that came in? That speaks volume. Because there's not an athlete anywhere that does not want to win a championship. Everybody gauges athletes on championships, Charlton. Regardless of how great they are, they gauge them on championships. It's like if you look at the NFL, an Alabama alumni, Joe Namath, had one winning season in the NFL. He won a Super Bowl. After he won the Super Bowl, many people don't realize Joe Namath never had another winning season in the NFL.
That's incredible.
As a starting quarterback, he never had another winning season in the NFL. And he had more interceptions than touchdowns in his career.
Wow.
But yet he's in the Hall of Fame and Jim Plunkett is not.
That does not make sense.
People think about Joe Namath as a winner. He's not. He was a losing quarterback in the NFL. He just happened to luck up on a Super Bowl. But he can always walk around with a Super Bowl championship ring saying that I was a Super Bowl champion. Just as Nick Saban shows up, gets out of the back of the limo that's dropped him off, maybe the helicopter in the middle of the street out
Probably
there.
helicopter.
The helicopter dropped him in the middle of the street. But he comes in there with a lean. People think Nick has swagger. He don't have swagger. He got a lean from the weight of all those rings on that arm. His right arm probably looks like Rafa Nadal's left arm from swinging a tennis racket. But he got all that jewelry on, and he walks in. So he can talk the game. He can talk street. He's got jewelry. He's got street cred. He's got diamonds. He's got weight. So that's his recruiting tool. So when you talk about another coach exceeding on what Nick Saban does, Charlton, we've seen Auburn one year go to the national championship game against Florida State. We've seen Georgia get to the national championship game last year. We've seen Nick Saban be challenged within the conference. But the bottom line is, he has the hardware. That's the number one recruiting tool out there, Charles.
Yeah, he looks like Thanos in Infinity Wars, and he's trying to destroy the whole universe. And he walks in with all those rings in his hand. That's a good tip you just gave, Big C. For the coaches, we always tell the parents to ask the coach what's the GPA of the players that they recruited in the past, and can you talk about that as much as how many games you won. But when a coach walks in and his opening elevator speech is, how many national championships did the last coach that talked to you have? I mean, that's a heck of a recruiting line, Big C. How many championships did the last coach that talked to you have?
He said he tell everybody. He said they promised you if you come there they're gonna win, didn't they? That was his sales line. He said all we do is win.
That's funny. He walks in with a DJ Khaled, all we do is win no matter what. I do want to say that sports is a billion-dollar industry, and boys and girls sports is a foundation to this billion-dollar industry. And for every athletic and sporting event, you need athletic and event insurance. We work with Ben and Mark. They've been around half a century. They work with Big C Sports, whether you're a pro team, a collegiate team, a high school team, or your mom and pop soccer league. When you reach out to them, let them know Big C sent you. They're also endorsed by the NCAA. So I love the fact that when we get in to the talk of college football, And I know there's some things that happen. I mean, it's just everybody's getting ready right now, especially in August where a lot of teams will start practicing. Another team, another program that has actually benefited from Nebraska not being able to get some of the top players from the West Coast, Big C, Boise State. Boise State, since I would say the pseudo-demise of Nebraska's program when they joined the Big Ten, Boise State has come on very strong as a West Coast team. Now, they're the Mountain West Conference. They don't play the heavyweight schedule of the Pac-12, but they can take on a team or two and knock them off. So even if you're a Pac-12 guy, you're in the 11 Western states, you think about going to play the Pac-12 conference. If you don't go there, you don't have to go to Nebraska anymore, or even Colorado. You can go right up to Boise State or Fresno State with Jeff Tefritt, bringing them back into the mix. They have those options that are Nevada or UNLV. They no longer have to just go west because all of those teams, their conferences have TV contracts. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they do. I mean, when you look at Boise up there on that blue turf, Charlton,
yeah,
they have that power, and they have knocked off Pac-12 teams every year.
Yeah.
Pac-12 teams have always been on Boise's schedule. They're not scared. They play the big boys. We've seen them in national games, Charlton, opening up the television schedule, traveling across country.
Yeah.
We've seen them knock off nationally ranked teams in bowl games, Charlton. All this has occurred in the last decade.
Yeah.
They have gone on the national landscape. They were a game away from playing for the national championship just a couple of years ago. So when you think about what Boise State has done, they've expanded their stadium up there, Charlton. They're an attraction. And when you look climatized-wise, their climate in Boise, Idaho is the same as in Lincoln, Nebraska, Charlton.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go all the way out the Midwest. You still have a proximity to the West Coast.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about Idaho, it's the next state over from Washington, Charlton.
Yeah.
So you're not that far away. So, and when you look at the draft, every year Boise is pumping 4 or 5 players into the NFL. Matter of fact, they had a number 1 draft pick, went to the Dallas Cowboys in this last draft.
Yeah.
And so they have players up and down NFL rosters. So it's not a bad place when you look at that. So some of these, mid-majors, Charlton, have really evolved. When you look at Boise, you look at some of the schools down in Texas. I mean, look at University of Houston, which has really upgraded its program and its stadium. We talked about Florida. Look how many teams from Florida last year, I believe it was 8, that played in bowl games, Charlton.
Yeah.
So, when you look that you don't have to travel now to go to the former big boys to play. When you look at Alabama's recruiting table, Charlton, yes, they recruit nationally.
Yeah.
But they get half the kids from their own state also.
Yeah.
They're fighting Auburn for the elite talent in the state. Then they also pull from Georgia and Florida also. They pull within that region, Charlton.
Yes.
They pull a couple of kids out of California. I know they got a top running back. I think his name is Williams, that played out there in the Bay Area. And, he should get a lot of playing time this year.
Yeah.
And he played a lot in the national championship game, Charlton.
He's out of Antioch, California.
But it's just a thing. You can stay regional now.
Yes.
And recruit players, and players will go regional, whether it's for travel because the NCAA doesn't want you to pay them.
Yep.
But the television is attractive everywhere. It's just not set with a few teams anymore.
Yeah, that's true. And one more thing on Boise. I remember a couple years ago, they opened up in Georgia, and they played Georgia, and they beat Georgia. I think they scored over 30 points against that Georgia team, an SEC team. They've also beaten Oregon twice. They had a game with Washington. They came close but didn't beat the Huskies. They did beat Washington State, and they kind of split with them. But they are a team that's...
Well, you remember when they beat Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl?
That's right. Beat Oklahoma as well.
Nationally televised game.
Yeah, so they're making the climb. And what football all over the country is great. I love the fact that it's here. But I do want to kick the ball off into the NFL. Sam Darnold out of USC signed with the New York Jets. And he signed... signed a 4-year, $30 million contract with the Jets. I think $20 million is guaranteed. But you just brought up something about Joe Namath. I look at Sam Darnold, and of course I hope he makes it. He's a Trojan. He was successful in high school, successful at USC. But that turnover ratio has to change. But here's a guy that, against Ohio State, he saw an NFL-type defense, didn't look very good. Even against Texas, a lot of their players were playing in the NFL. They had, I think, an overtime win at the Coliseum against them. Not blaming him, but he had the majority of turnovers in those games. Even at Notre Dame, when they had the game at Notre Dame, the first possession was a fumble snap. But now he's getting $30 million, and this is the same player people were saying should stay another year at USC. To get better, yes. To get the money, no. He took the money. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I think Pete Carroll said the same thing about Mark Sanchez when the Jets drafted him in the first round.
Yeah.
You know, almost a decade ago, is that he needs to stay in school. He needs another year.
Yep.
He's not ready. So, you know, sometimes coaches know that when they're bringing a kid along.
Yeah.
But Sam Darnold, if he has the success that Sanchez had the first couple of years, and Sanchez made it to the AFC Championship games back-to-back years,
right, yeah.
No one gives him credit for that. They only want to talk about this fumble that he had.
Yeah.
But he had much success. You know, when the Jets went down, it wasn't because of him, it was because of injuries.
Yeah.
You know, this is a situation when you're looking at Todd Bowles, the head coach of the Jets, even more so than Donald. You know, Bowles is on the hot seat. Donald's going to be there for 4 years, guaranteed.
Yeah.
You know, it's up to Bowles how he manages the situation. Can Donald adjust to the speed of the NFL? Now, he's missed the first week of training camp.
Yep.
So he's behind 8 ball. And this is one of the things, players are slotted when they're drafted. They're going to get X amount of dollars. I wish that the NFL would implement this because even Roquan Smith, linebacker from the University of Georgia, who was drafted by the Bears in the first round, still hasn't signed because they're putting paperwork in his contract about this new helmet rule that's in.
Yeah.
The NFL should mandate by training camp that all rookies need to be under contract because it's slated what they're going to make. You know, once that number one pick is signed, Charlton, everybody else falls into a slot down the line.
Yeah.
Period. Regardless of where you were taking it, it's already slotted what you're going to make. Why have these players hold out? It should be mandated. If they don't make first day of training camp, Charlton, they got a 4-game suspension. Let's cut the playing out with the rookies.
Yeah.
You know, you got veterans that are going to lose their job because you drafted these rookies.
Yeah.
But it should be an automatic 4-game suspension. If you're not under contract by day one of training camp, it's a 4-game suspension. That's conduct detrimental to the team. I think under the clause of the NFL players contract, that's conduct detrimental to the team, Charlton, because you're putting yourself before the team. I understand that everybody wants all the money that they can get.
Yes.
But you're behind the 8 ball. They say this is our franchise player. Well, you're not thinking about the franchise when you're not in practice.
Yeah.
But if the NFL implements that rule, I think all these agents will get these players signed, and they can be in camp first day of training camp.
Well, you mentioned something that I think is more important than how much money is signed for. When you look at him in his competition that he had in the Pac-12, I mean, I'm a Pac-12 guy, but only one Pac-12 school won a bowl game. They all got knocked off. So when I look at, I mean, maybe it's down into a one possession, but they still lost all their bowl games except for one team. So when Sam Darnold goes up against Ohio State, I'm sure Ohio State studied him the whole week before the game. And when they played against Texas, I know Texas studied them before the game. When they played against Stafford, they had a good game against Stafford, but they've seen each other every year. But also Notre Dame, when they went back to South Bend and looked pretty bad. Now, I'm sure if you look at the AFC East, the Patriots, Buffalo, and also Miami, they're going to study him too. So against the teams that have, and also Mike Leach up at Washington State studied him very well. I'm just bringing up the games they lost because their defense figured him out, and he had the most turnovers. So if the college coaching staff can figure him out, and he led the country in turnovers for drafted quarterbacks, Big C, what will the AFC East figure out about Darnold? And he has the goal not to show up in camp on time, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, that puts him behind, so you already know that the veteran's going to start. And when you throw him out there, Charlton, how is he going to be? Is he going to be the kid that was playing against Washington State? Is he going to be the kid that was playing against Texas? Is he going to be the kid that was playing against Ohio State? Is he going to be that kid, Charlton?
Yeah.
Or is he going to be the kid that played against Penn State in the Rose Bowl 2 years ago?
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see that Donald in the pro game, Charlton, the one that played against Penn State and threw for 500 yards. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, he's going to have a lot of pressure on him. The Jets have gaps, Charlton, in the offense. Who's going to be the running back? Who are the receivers in New York? So, you know, he had a lot of talent around him at USC that will play in the next level for a long time. I don't know if his NFL team has that same amount of talent, Charlton, especially at the skill positions.
Yeah.
He had a running back that was drafted. He had receivers that were young, but they're going to be drafted in the next year or two in the NFL.
Yes.
He had an offensive line that was suspect at times. He has an offensive line that's suspect with the Jets, Charlton.
All the
His
time.
mobility is going to be really questioned when he gets to the NFL because the linebackers in the NFL, Charlton, all can run.
Yeah, they all can run, especially that the fact that you mentioned in the NFL, the linebackers are just as fast as the DBs in college. And your linemen may be as fast as the linebackers in college. I mean, I wish him well, but I'm just looking at the games where he played against the top competition, the top athletes. He had more turnovers than he did against weaker teams. There are no weak links in the NFL. I want to look at some of what's happening with training camp right now. Like, what's leading to the excessive numbers, injuries in training camp this year? Is it the excessive heat? It's really hot in California, but it's hot everywhere. No longer do we have people who aren't aware of how to keep athletes cool down or cut back on some of the contact. But your thoughts on why there seems to be more injuries right now, Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, my thought process on that is this new helmet rule. That players are trying to adjust how they make movement in to make a tackle or to avoid a tackle.
Yeah.
And I think, when you take away the basics that kids have learned their entire lives, and they're grown men now, Charlton, but you've been taught the fundamentals of football since Pop Warner or high school, whenever you started.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden you're being told you got to close that off, that aspect of how you learn to play football and change everything in a matter of months. You have to adjust everything you've known about football. You can no longer make this game violent. I look at when they took the bump rule out of football, Charlton, where, you had the 5-yard rule that the defensive back or linebacker could only chuck a receiver.
Yes.
After that, he had to leave him alone. And look how that affected football. They say it's about offense. This new rule also, Charlton, is about trying to enhance the offense. I mean, I understand the safety aspect, but it's about trying to enhance the offense, saying that you can't strike a guy with your helmet. So that means every offensive lineman, Charlton, is going to get kicked out of a game.
Yep.
They initiate contact with their helmet. So that means you got to carry 20 offensive linemen on your roster.
Wow.
I mean, if we're going to enact this rule the way it's written, you can't sit there and say it only applies to defensive backs and linebackers and maybe a few defensive linemen.
Yes.
Every offensive lineman will get kicked out of the game if you apply this rule. Every fullback, Charlton, will get kicked out of the game.
Yeah.
So I don't know how the NFL plans on policing this, because all they can do is confuse players. You're talking about a 15-yard penalty. It's just like calling a holding penalty. You can do that on every play, Charlton, in a football game.
Yeah.
That's what this new rule, this new helmet rule is in the NFL. You can throw this flag every play because all you got to do is watch the offensive lineman. You're going to get them for holding and striking with the helmet on the same play, Charlton.
Yeah, how I think about the players, and holding can be called on every play. And as a defensive player, I'm sure you were held every play. See, not every other play, but every play. We know that's the case for defensive guys. How about some of the players back in the day that played the game where you could do anything? I look at how they had to stick them. I think it was Lester Hayes that made the NFL implement the no.
Fred Biletnikoff started that, and Lester Hayes went over the top with it.
so Fred was getting away with it. Lester Hayes, he had a drip on him like a hand in a peanut butter jar. He had somebody stick him on his hands, Big C. But those teams that play it more physical, I don't know if they had as many injuries back then as they do now, because as an athlete, you prepared to tackle a certain way. You prepare to get hit a certain way. I know we have the concussion rule, the CTE issue, but I don't know how we're going to make it any safer with players not knowing how to tackle now, Big C. They're kind of afraid, and they're the ones who are getting hurt because they don't really know what to do, and the collision doesn't get softer. They just don't know where to put their head now, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you were taught growing up to bow your head back, hit with your face.
Yeah.
Put your face mask on the numbers. That's how you were taught to play football, not to dip your head down,
right?
Because that's where the neck injuries occur, and people still do that, Charlton, and get neck injuries. But you were taught to look through the numbers. Your eye should end up in the player's back when you were making a tackle.
Yeah.
That's how we were taught growing up, Charlton, and life went that way. I can look at photos of when I played, Charlton, making tackles. I'm leading with my face.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things we prided ourselves on as linemen is having all that rubber tore off the face mask where you had bare metal.
Yeah.
Because you were making contact, you were hitting. To have a bent bar on your face mask, Charlton,
yeah,
you were making contact. You didn't pull your helmet out of contact, Charlton. It was always there. But now you're telling these guys that you've played football for 10 years this way, okay, using your helmet, not as a weapon, but as a device.
Yeah.
But now you can no longer do that. You have to take this out. So when you're coming in to make a tackle, and like I said, I think this is what's attributing to these injuries is that players are trying to alter their body in mid-flight, Charlton.
Yeah.
And they're causing leg injuries, shoulder injuries because of this.
Yeah.
And so when we look at the NFL, it's just like with the flag rule, Charlton, standing for the anthem. You know, you're trying to alter what people do naturally, and that's hard. That's like if you're right-handed, they say, okay, now you got to throw left-handed. It doesn't always work well for you, Charles.
Yeah, that's true. So we know people are going to find a way to figure it out. We hope that they can stay in a situation where we just cut down on some of the injuries. I do want to touch just a little bit WNBA All-Star Game. It was on ABC, and that was on Saturday. And a good game. I thought the women have a good game, but it wasn't really marketed enough. It wasn't marketed as much as even you think about the college draft for the NFL and for the NBA. And I contrast the women's All-Star game, the way the men had their game contrasted. And I just think that it's a good sport, and you actually see women with the fundamentals, Big C. Will we ever see it marketed? It's been around about 20 years now, but will we ever see it marketed the way the men are even marketed for high school, college football, and basketball drafts, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, you know, I think the networks cover it, Charlton, just because they need a filler. I don't think that they're in love with the ladies' game, Charlton, because you don't see the enthusiasm. The fanfare was great.
Yeah.
To have a packed house, Charlton, and the appreciation of the fans, and the great game by the ladies offensively, Charlton. They really put on a show for those fans that were there and on television.
Yeah.
But you can almost get it from the broadcasters. When the guys are doing NBA games, you can tell that they're fans.
Yeah.
When the guys and the ladies are doing the WNBA game, Charlton, you can tell that they're working.
Yeah.
You know, that's the difference. And it comes across that way in the broadcast. It's like, yeah, we hear, you know, it's like I'd much rather have the guys playing in front of me, but, you know, we're doing this because we get a paycheck. and you can't do that to the fans that are watching.
Yeah.
These ladies play wholeheartedly, Charlton. They're great fundamental basketball, and they're competitors.
Yes.
They go out and they compete, and they try to put on the best performance they can night after night. They don't have the situations that the men have in the NBA. Well, you know, I'm tired, and I'm going to take the game off. You know, I got a toenail injury, so even though you can't see in my shoe, but I can't play this week. You know, my ham's tight, so I'm going to sit this night. I had a headache before the game. You know, you think about the things that women go through that men don't go through, but these women still go out there and play.
Yeah.
They have physical situations that men don't have, but they still go out there and play, Charlton. They don't use excuses.
Yeah.
But the broadcasters, you can see the excuse that they're using during the game is that I'm getting paid to do this.
Yeah, and speaking of excuses too, I want to touch on something that happened in Major League Baseball. Sean Newcomb, pitcher for the Atlanta Braves, became within one hit of a no-hitter after a game, and he had some Papa John's type of tweets, Big C. And I know nobody's perfect, and also some homophobic tweets were released, but that was 9 years ago. Now, I know what we have happen in the White House with the president's lawyers recording conversations. I just assume that everybody's recording my conversation nowadays, Big C. 9 years ago, I don't know if he's had a Richie Incognito type of, rant, but why would it come up and it happened 9 years ago? Are they going to start going back 20 years ago when somebody said something stupid in high school, Big C? Your thoughts?
Okay, Charlton, but who said it?
It was Newcomb.
Okay, he did the tweets, didn't he?
Yeah.
It was his Twitter account. He still has the same Twitter account, okay?
Oh, really?
Why did he eliminate that Twitter account, if that's the case? Okay, he said it 9 years ago. He's a professional now. People say, well, it was when he was young. Yeah. We've all been young, okay? He's a grown man now, allegedly.
Yeah.
Why didn't he get in front of this and say, I made some asinine tweets almost a decade ago.
Yeah.
And I want to be apologetic for it. I want to get out in front of this because I know now in this age of social media, somebody's going to find these tweets.
Yeah.
And I want to apologize. I was young, I was stupid, and I shouldn't have done it. And I want to apologize to any and everybody that I may have offended and hurt. That's what you need to say. Don't wait till somebody finds the tweets, and then all of a sudden, I was in a drunken stupor.
Yeah, I was drunk, I was
young,
sleepy, and all
I was
that. Yeah.
unresponsible.
Yeah.
That's not a reflection of me now. Now. So, how all of a sudden you're not the same body and mind that you were 9 years ago?
Yeah.
You know, this is the thing that everybody wants to say, I've changed as a person. But I didn't change until I get caught.
Well,
you know,
who's the quarterback?
That's the thing. Until I get caught, I'm not a changed person.
The quarterback out of Wyoming that just got picked up, he's actually out of Fireball, California, a kind of small farming community in Southern California. Thing. Yeah, same thing. And then Papa John's, they all have this come to Jesus moment where they say, I'm sorry, but, you know, it's out of the heart the mouth will speak. So, obviously, I know everybody has issues, no matter what it is. I hope that he'll get rid of it.
Let me do this, Charlton.
Yeah.
I want to apologize to any and everybody that I may have offended in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I have said things and I have done things that have offended people.
Yeah.
I know that. I've offended myself.
Yeah.
But I want to go out on the airways right now before somebody finds a tweet.
Me too.
Because I don't have a Twitter account, but I know somebody will create one for me. But
Yeah.
I just want to let everybody know, I apologize wholeheartedly and sincerely.
Yeah.
You don't have to go dig up anything. I want to apologize right now. Because when you do find something,
yeah.
I
apologize for it. That's a good teaching message for everybody. We all said something stupid except for Jesus. I'm sure he said a few stupid things over the years too, Big C, but we all know that's a fact. I want to just touch on the NFL. They've reached a $500 million settlement on concussions, the league announced today. What does that mean, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, what actually happened there, Charlton, is that they've already reached $500 million in settlements. And that's happened a decade quicker than what they expected. They expected for this to go on further and further, so they're reaching their money threshold quicker than what they thought. If you recall, I believe it was like $750 million that they gave to the Players Association. They've already, Charlton, in 2 years, settled $500 million in settlements that they've reached. So they're nowhere near reaching, Charlton, the amount of settlement capacity that's out there. So the NFL will have a shortfall in the amount of money as far as these settlement cases that have come out, Charlton. But that just lets you know how many players were injured, Charlton, over the decades playing this game that, you know, came out as soon as there was an opportunity to put in their claim. And so the NFL is going to have to revisit this financially.
Yeah.
And when that judge from Minnesota had said she didn't like the settlement because she didn't feel that it was enough money based on the number of players that had played the game, Charlton.
Yeah.
And she was correct. This lady judge in Minnesota was correct 2 years ago when she, you know, put a halt to the initial settlement of the NFL, saying that she didn't feel that that was going to be sufficient to cover all the player claims over the next couple of years that would come out. And she was solely correct. She had the foresight to see that the NFL was still taking advantage of these former players.
Well, I tell you what, we all know it's a serious issue. We want to get on top of it. We hope that people can remain safe. The league will always do whatever it can to make the league, at least the game, safer. At least we hope. And when players have issues, I hope that they can make sure that players can get access to some health care, even some free health care. There are a lot of guys having body parts replaced and joints replaced as we get ready for $1 billion stadiums coming up all over the country. We love WNBA basketball. Great competition over the weekend. The trade deadline for Major League Baseball is approaching. Who's going to go where? And we know soccer is being played all over the country. A lot of people enjoying kicking the ball around. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Bundini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man. He would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Charlton, you know, like you said, the baseball trade deadline is tomorrow. Who is going to pull the trigger on a trade, Charlton, that is going to be that integral player to get them to the World Series? We saw that last year with the Houston Astros, Charlton. when they got Verlander in, he didn't lose a game, Charlton, all the way through the World Series. Who will get help this year? We see that the Baltimore Orioles have basically disbanded their team, Charlton. They've gotten rid of the best pitchers that they had, along with the shortstop Machado.
Yeah.
Who will pull the trigger tonight to get them over the top?
Well, we will definitely bring it to you. For everyone in Northern California, please heed the warnings and just evacuate. Speaking of heeding the warnings, every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide, follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever any excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please call 911, because no woman or man should ever have to deal with that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.